Canadian politicians talk a lot about pipelines. And Canada has a lot of them. Maybe more than you realized. Definitely more than I realized.
So why are we hearing about building more pipelines? Do they even make sense for Canada's economy?
Will be the proponent of an oil pipeline to the northwest BC coast.
And what about our emissions goals? The first answer is simple. Ever since Donald Trump became president again, our most reliable trade partner has become our least predictable. And Prime Minister Mark Carney's elbows up agenda means finding new markets for Canadian products, including fossil fuels. To some, that means more ways to move them around. The other questions are more complicated.
I spoke with our climate investigations reporter in Ontario, Carl Meyer, and Prairies reporter Drew Anderson in Alberta to learn more.
Anytime we talk about a new pipeline, we have to start with the fact that we're in a climate crisis that's being driven by the overproduction of fossil fuels. A recent report showed countries like Canada continue to produce more oil and gas than would be consistent with holding temperatures to a level that avoids severe and irreversible damage to the earth. In a way, talking about new pipelines, which are moving fossil fuels from one place to another, is accepting the status quo.
So let's dive in. Pipelines are built to carry fossil fuels. They can travel by pipeline instead of by truck or train, but what they carry varies. Not all pipelines even carry liquids. Some carry high-pressure gases. Virtually all pipelines carry just one specific product, whether that's diluted bitumen, crude oil, or methane gas. A new cross-country oil pipeline is likely to start in the Alberta oil sands.
In Canada, the oil sands are the largest contributor to crude oil production and a contributor to Canada's growth in emissions. I mean, from 1990 to 2023, the oil sands saw a 480% rise in carbon pollution. But what the oil sands mostly produce is bitumen. It's a molasses-like sticky petroleum substance.
Bitumen is a heavy gunk that can't be processed into products like gasoline at most refineries. It just needs extra steps before that. And Canada only has a few facilities called refineries that can process all the bitumen it digs up.
Refineries in general are wildly expensive to build and maintain. They've been basically dying a slow death in Canada, from 40 in the 1970s to 17 in 2023. The only one built in the last 30 years, it almost doubled in price and has cost the province of Alberta billions and counting.
Most of the bitumen Canada produces is diluted with other petroleum products. So it can flow through pipelines to a refinery somewhere else. This diluted bitumen, or dilbit for short, is mostly piped to the United States. Why? Because over the years, the refineries in the US Midwest and the Gulf Coast have been specifically configured to process it.
So nearly 95% of Alberta's dilbit is exported to the US.
This relationship has been especially profitable for the fossil fuel industry, which has had many pipelines crossing the Canada-US border. But Prime Minister Mark Carney was elected on an elbows-up mandate to diversify Canadian businesses so they're not so dependent on the United States.
So yeah, if oil from Alberta doesn't go to the US, then it's a question of what other country wants it. You know, China has been taking increasing amounts of it, but Canada already has a pipeline to the west coast that carries it to ships bound for Asia called Trans Mountain. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has been pushing the idea of another oil pipeline on the west coast. And her government recently announced it will backstop a new West Coast pipeline proposal. There's reason for the government interest. It receives billions of dollars in royalty payments from oil and gas. The budget in Alberta, it sinks or swims on the price of a barrel.
And then there are natural gas or methane gas pipelines.
Canada already has a major cross-country gas pipeline, as well as a network of gas distribution lines in places like Ontario. But several new gas pipelines are already being built or considered to feed the growing industry for liquefied natural gas, or LNG, which is a fossil fuel mostly made up of methane. Making and exporting LNG is very energy intensive. You're often fracking for gas and then sending that gas through pipelines, cleaning it up, getting it to a facility where it's super chilled into liquid form, loading it onto tankers, shipping it across an ocean, turning it back into gas, putting it back through pipelines there, and eventually burned for energy. Scientists have shown that methane is leaking into the atmosphere at many points along this process. So that, combined with the emissions when the gas is burned, can, in some cases, make it actually worse for the environment than coal. One pipeline was built recently to serve a huge LNG export terminal in Kitimat, BC, called LNG Canada. Another one, called Prince Rupert Gas Transmission, aka PRGT, is being built, and that's expected to serve another BC LNG terminal. And there could be more on the East Coast if a new proposal off Newfoundland and Labrador goes ahead.
Do you remember that report we mentioned at the beginning? Well, we're collectively already producing too many fossil fuels to avoid some of the worst impacts of climate change. These pipelines will allow us room to export more, kind of like building more lanes on a highway.
Well, there are 840,000 kilometers of pipelines already in Canada. Most of those are in Alberta. And if you were to stretch these all together, you could go to the moon and back. And even then some.
New pipelines are also likely to cross the territory of First Nations, many of whom have opposed previous pipeline proposals. It raises questions about Indigenous sovereignty, a subject my colleague Michelle Sisa dove into in a different explainer video, which you should go watch right after this one.
A new oil pipeline to BC would probably mean overturning Trudeau's oil tanker ban on the North Coast. Otherwise, the oil has nowhere else to go. And what about First Nations opposition?
The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and the Coastal GasLink pipeline both took 12 years from proposal to reality. Trans Mountain was initially estimated to cost $5.4 billion, and it ended up costing $34 billion.
We don't know where oil and gas demand is going to be decades from now. Oil demand in Asia is being dented by electric vehicles. Oil production in the US might be slowing, but at the same time, we see industry expanding in many places.
So the question is, how safe is it to bet our economic future on fossil fuels when it could take another 12 years to build just one new pipeline, even if we fast track it? And how many more billions of dollars will we have to sink into it by then?
The rising emissions from the Canadian oil and gas industry keep canceling out gains made in other sectors. But we made a commitment in law to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. It will be hard to reach that goal if the fossil fuel sector keeps expanding.
Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. This was a great one to put together. It took us a long time, and I really want to thank the reporters that I spoke to for this story to make it happen. You can follow Carl and Drew on Blue Sky, Ottawa Carl and Drew Anderson. And if you'd like to see more stories just like this one, please consider subscribing to the channel. All of your support is greatly appreciated. And if you'd like to support the Narwhal, consider joining our Pod of Narwhals over on our website. We publish investigative stories every week, and we also send out a super fun newsletter for free. The links to everything are in the description down below.